Have you ever come across an idea that feels like a huge contradiction? Like, how can a belief system that talks a lot about peace sometimes be used to justify, well, the exact opposite? Today, we're going to unpack a really provocative framework from one author who tries to answer that very question. It's a pretty complex idea, so let's break it down together. Okay, so the whole analysis really boils down to this one incredibly powerful question. How does this even happen? What is the mechanism? What's the process that can take a theology rooted in peace and, according to this author, twist it into a justification for violence against people who don't believe? That's the big puzzle we're going to try and piece together. Now, the author's answer isn't a simple one. They argue that it's a whole process of subversion, and it's built on 6 interconnected paradoxes. Think of it like this octopus on the slide, right? You've got this central idea, but it has all these different arms, each one a concept that seems contradictory on its own, but when they work together, they create a really powerful worldview. And here they are. These are the 6 paradoxes that really form the backbone of this entire argument. We're going to walk down this path, one step at a time, to see how the author claims each idea leads logically to the next, building a system that's complete and totally self-reinforcing. So first up is what the author calls the mind war. And the idea here is that before any physical conflict ever happens, there's a battle for reality itself. It all kicks off with the first and maybe the most important paradox, the paradox of truth. This slide right here is absolutely crucial. The author draws a really sharp line between two things. Over on the left, you've got truth, what they define as something absolute, something that doesn't change. But then on the right, you have narrative, and that's something that can be bent, it's partisan, and it's built by twisting that very truth. The core argument is, if you can get people to value a compelling narrative over objective truth, you can basically control their entire worldview. So how do you keep a narrative going when it might actually contradict reality? Well, according to the author, it takes real effort. They use a term like thought police to describe the forces that stamp out any disagreement, and double thinking for the mental gymnastics people have to do to hold 2 contradictory ideas in their head at the same time. It's all about controlling the present so you can rewrite the past. Okay, so once that narrative is locked in, the author argues that you can start redefining really fundamental values. And they start with justice. It stops being universal and becomes partisan. The text calls this Abrahamic justice and says it stems from a simple, ancient idea: you help your friends and you harm your enemies. Suddenly, justice isn't blind anymore, it's picking a side. And to drive this point home, the author cites this specific phrase. The analysis here argues that the act of not believing is itself defined as the wrongdoing. Now, just think about the implication of that for a second. If simply not believing makes you the criminal, then non-believers are, by definition, the bad guys. Justice now works one way for people inside the group and a completely different way for everyone outside of it. And when you redefine something as big as justice, it creates a domino effect. This brings us right to the next part of this framework, how core virtues, things like tolerance and peace, can get completely flipped on their head. Next up, the author brings in the philosopher Karl Popper to talk about tolerance. And this one is a real head-scratcher. If a society is totally, completely tolerant, what does it do about the people who are intolerant? Popper's argument, as it's used here, is that if you tolerate the very people who want to destroy tolerance, you'll eventually lose tolerance altogether. It's a fascinating argument for being intolerant, all in the name of preserving tolerance. This twisted logic then leads us to the paradox of peace. The source shows 2 very different views. On one side, peace is a journey. It's a way of living your life, and violence is something that knocks you off that path. But on the other side, peace is a destination, a perfect utopia that you have to fight to reach. And here's the really dangerous flip. According to the author, if peace is just some goal in the future, then almost any action right now, including violence, can be justified as a necessary step to get there. So, if you can justify violence today in the name of some perfect peace tomorrow, where does that road end? Well, according to this framework, it leads us to the final and, frankly, the most alarming section, a state of perpetual conflict. The author then lays out what they describe as a kind of tactical playbook for operating within a house of war, which basically means a land of non-believers. And look at this timeline. It starts with dawat, a peaceful invitation when the group is small. Then it moves to muahida, a contract for peaceful coexistence while the group grows. But the author claims this is all just temporary. Once they hit a certain demographic threshold, the model says the contract is torn up, and a doctrine of terror is put in its place. The argument is that any period of stability is just a strategic pause. It's not the actual goal. And here's the kicker. Because that cycle could theoretically happen again and again anywhere the group isn't the majority, the conflict, according to the author, never really stops. The ultimate goal becomes a perpetual, incessant war that's framed as a secret duty. It's not a temporary situation. It's the default state of being. And all of this brings us to the final and maybe the most shocking piece of the whole puzzle, the paradox of fear. The author's claim is that this entire ideological engine isn't run on confidence at all, but on deep, profound insecurity, a fear that the ultimate mission of total world conversion might actually fail. And this fear, they say, is so powerful that it allows any offensive act to be reframed as defensive, as a desperate move to protect the faith. And that creates this perfect, self-perpetuating loop where fear justifies aggression, and that aggression creates even more fear. So, there you have it. That's a framework. From twisting the very nature of truth to a perpetual war that the author says is fueled by fear, it paints a picture of a self-sustaining cycle of conflict. But the analysis doesn't give us an easy answer. Instead, it leaves us with the biggest question of all. If a system is really designed for perpetual conflict, can a cycle like that ever be broken?